If you are interested in acquiring any of my Overkills tutorial guides from Microsoft Flight Simulator, or simply interested in supporting the channel, please consider joining us on Patreon. Patreon subscribers level tier 2 and above have access to all of my guides, as well as any future releases that come down the road. Patreon link can be found in the description below. Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel, and in this case welcome to DCS World. Been a while since we've been here, and the reason we are here today is somebody has asked in the Discord how to fly a helicopter. Now I figured if one person has a question, probably many, and there are probably many that stick to fixed wing because they're intimidated by helicopters, and so I'm going to hopefully try to help solve some of those inhibitions to the helos, because rotors are definitely fun. Now, I want to preface this video before we get started that I am not a real helicopter pilot. I am not the end-all, be-all. I do not have all the information, and if I happen to say something incorrectly, please feel free to clarify down below. Just be nice. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to get right into it. We're going to start with just the very basics, and then we're going to take it up and go fly around and talk about some of the risks and things that you obviously want to avoid, as well as some of the cool things you can do when you get like me and just enjoy showboating in the helicopters. Now, the reason why we are in DCS World today is because I find that even though Microsoft Flight Simulator has gotten significantly better, I find that the flight model in DCS World for helicopters, and especially for the UH-1, is significantly better than Microsoft Flight Simulator. Flight Simulator? Nice. Anyway, you guys catch the gist, so let's start getting into this. So first we're going to talk about the 2 or 3 basic controls. Anti-torque pedals, your cyclic, and the collective. Okay? Now what does each one do? The cyclic, if you guys watch the main rotors, if I push the cyclic forward, you can see the main rotors are dipping down. If I pitch it aft, you can see the main rotor picks up. Same thing with the right. You can sort of see it generating a little bit of angle there. And if I rock to the left, you can see it pitching the other direction. You can also see DCS World in the top left-hand corner, guys, has a nice controls indicator. This is our cyclic, anti-torque pedals, and the collective. So that way you guys have a visual reference of exactly what I'm doing with the controls as we move forward. Now, the cyclic, based on the pitch of the main rotors, is much like the same thing that you would see in an aircraft. It controls forward motion, aft motion, left and right. Now, what does the anti-torque pedals do? The anti-torque pedals controls the centrifugal force or torque generated by the main rotor and helps counteract that. Hence, they are actually called anti-torque pedals. They are not called rudder pedals as we're used to seeing in fixed-wing aircraft. And then you have the collective. What does the collective do? The collective, essentially, think of it as increasing the pitch that you would, like on our complex aircraft in Microsoft Flight Simulator, where you have throttle, pitch, and mixture. Think of it as pitch. Now, it's not exactly right, but what it does is increases the bite of the main rotor. So, actually, I guess it kind of does really do the same thing. The more collective you add, changes the angle of the main rotor, which digs into the air even further, generating more downforce, therefore creating lift. And then, essentially, when you add forward motion, creating your forward motion as well. Okay, and we're going to see some of that here in a minute. So, you also do have a throttle, which is usually found on the collective grip. You guys can see it turning there. But it doesn't do what you think it does. What it does is controls the engine RPMs. Okay, and that's our gauge down there. You guys can sort of see it down there. If I really start bringing that back, we should see the engine RPM start to drop. There they go. And then what you'll get a low RPM warning if you get too low. There it is. So let's start increasing them back up. Usually, once you get up to flight power, you usually never touch it again. It's very rare that, in rare circumstances, you might, but I'm not going to go into those because for the most part, especially for flight simulation, you usually can just leave it at max power and then not touch the throttle again until it's time for shutdown. So let's go ahead and now start talking about, well, how do we move around in a helicopter? The first thing that I'm going to tell you guys right out of the bat that I want you to really drill into your head, with a helicopter, less is more. You rarely are you going to find yourself making movements like this in a helicopter, where it's more like this. Now you're going to be doing a lot of this, a lot of fine little itty bitty movements, especially when it comes time to learn how to hover. Okay, and I'm going to tell you right now again, I am no pro at it. It takes a while. So now let's talk about some of the forces that you're going to be fighting when you go to fly a helicopter. If I increase the collective, I'm going to take my hands off the cyclic and I'm going to take my feet off of the anti-torque pedals and just start increasing the collective, and let's see what the helicopter does. As the down force from the main rotor increases, you can see we're generating some torque. Centrifugal force is causing the aircraft to rotate, and that's where our anti-torque pedals come into play. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use left anti-torque pedal to counteract the rotation. Now, you guys can see that I've pretty much got it straightened out, but if I increase the collective again, now we're going to go all over the place. Okay? The more collective, the more anti-torque. Now, this is just in start. Okay? This is just before takeoff and just in low airspeed. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But you can also saw that it wanted to pitch. So this is where we're going to bring our cyclic back just a little bit. Okay, so we're going to bring our cyclic back into the left. We saw that the aircraft wanted to pitch forward and to the right. So again, keeping my anti-torque in, adding that collective, adding more anti-torque. If it starts to rotate, you need more anti-torque. And you guys can sort of see that, but now we're not pitching as much. And the aircraft is starting to lift. And we got a little bit of left movement there, so I'm going to come just a hair to the right. But you guys can see, watch the cyclic. It takes very little movement to move the helicopter around. Okay, you don't want to do real hard movements. No, none of this, because then you'll end up in a spinning disaster all over the place. And if it starts to get out of control, believe it or not, rest the cyclic. Don't fight it. Let it do what it's going to do for a second and then correct. Now, you can see we have some left and forward motion going. If I want to arrest that, I need to bring the rotor to the right. Everything is about opposite force. So we're going to bring it to the right and a little bit aft to stop our forward speed. And once we've stopped our forward speed, you want to bring the cyclic back to a relatively neutral position. Otherwise, you'll start going backwards. So for example, if I just hold it, we're not moving forward anymore, but now we're starting to go back. Start going backwards, same thing. I'm going to pitch it forward a little bit to stop the aft movement and then bring it back to a more or less central position and try to maintain the helicopter's position. The one thing I'll tell you guys that is also very helpful, don't look at the ground. Find a space out. Like I'm looking at the Apache in front of us right now. And just try to keep it relatively the same size, in the same position of the cockpit. Obviously, your peripheral vision and your vision in general will let you know if you're moving a direction. But this is a great way to sort of practice getting into that low hover. The low hover can be a little bit tricky because you're also dealing with ground force. Now, guys, I'm going to give you another little tip here that I just even noticed I'm doing. I'm using just my index finger. My index finger right now is the only thing touching the cyclic. Literally the only thing. I am doing all of this with my index finger. You guys can see there I am wiggling it around. Okay, that's just my index finger. Don't full grip it. Don't try to choke the crap out of the cyclic. Be gentle with it. I can't stress that enough. Less is more. If you try to fly it like a fighter, or you try to fly it like an airplane where you grip the yoke and you hold it tight, whatever, and even in an airplane, you know, when we're flying our Cessna 172s or G36s, whatever it may be, you probably have a pretty relaxed grip on the yoke. It's the same thing with a helicopter, and even more so. Everything is fine touches, especially at low speed and low altitude. Okay? And then what you can do is you start getting comfy, but everything's about finding a visual spot. Find a visual spot. Find a visual reference. Right now I'm looking at that blue taxi light. Okay? And I'm just trying to keep it more or less in the same spot. And I'm just sort of focusing on what I need to do. Like still got my left anti-torque pedal in. You guys can see the controls indicator. I'm just let's just walk it around the taxiway. Okay? Now, I'm still moving forward, but if I remember how it works, it's not like a rudder pedal. This is where that anti-torque comes into play. The rotor is pushing the aircraft forward. It's not turning it. The main rotor is not what is turning us around. The anti-torque pedals are. I'm releasing that anti-torque pedal pressure and letting the nose come to the right like it's trying to do. Remember, we were using left anti-torque to stop that. I know you guys probably can't hear me very well because of the microphone, but so I'll look out the front window now so you guys can hear me better. But I'm just letting go of that left anti-torque and letting the aircraft walk around. Notice that I'm still, watch the cyclic. I'm not moving the cyclic at all. Now, we're going to get faster and faster and faster if we're not careful. So, I'm going to pull it to the right. Now I'm adding some cyclic. We're going to stop that forward momentum. Pull it way back. But again, watch, gentle. I'm still moving gently. I still only have my fingertips on the cyclic. Just the fingertips. That's all you need. And a great collective, you guys, if you guys are interested in getting one, is the Virpil Ace Collective set. Or not Ace, I can't remember that. I think it's still VPC Ace. But the Virpil Collective is a fantastic collective. And a collective in general, if you guys can get one, will absolutely change the way you fly helicopters. I never thought it would. I held off and held off and held off and held off. I was like, I'm perfectly fine using my throttle until I actually got my hands on a collective. And then the game changed. Because the nice thing about if you actually have a collective is you know that when you push the collective down, the helicopter will go down. If you pull it up towards your chest, the helicopter comes up. So it makes it a lot easier to make that mental reference. And the other thing is a nice flight stick will work beautifully. It will change your days. I have the Virpil MC3 base with the Mongoose 2, I think it is, grip. But really, any good, solid flight stick will work. I do recommend, if you're going to use the Thrustmaster Warthog, my only recommendation there would be get an extension for it, because the Thrustmaster Warthog gets a little bit tougher because it's got such a big spring in it, and it makes it real hard to do those fine movements. Okay, those real gentle movements that I'm talking about, that big spring in the Thrustmaster Warthog makes it a little bit more difficult. Now, at the same token, on the caveat to that, like the 3D Extreme joystick with a real loose spring in it actually benefits here in the helicopter. It's actually a benefit because it doesn't require a whole lot to move it around. And again, you want that. You want those real gentle pressures. You want to be able to just barely move it, put it wherever you want, and set it down. Slowly reduce power. Remember I said less is more. You're not going to be moving the collective real fast. You're not going to be jerking it and pulling it, things like that. And honestly, if you do that, you can end up damaging or throwing the main rotor essentially across the yard. So everything is smooth, gentle actions in a helicopter. Believe it or not, even in a combat scenario, where I'm going to show you guys here how to pick up and get flying here. So I hope this is helping so far, you guys, in understanding how to maneuver a helicopter around. And this is definitely how I recommend you practice. Practice the little lifts. Don't practice just picking it up and going flying around town. Practice a little lift, pick it up just a few feet, and just practice sort of just holding it. Because if you can learn to just hold it, you will find that when it comes time to fly it, it gets much easier to understand what the helicopter is doing. So much of the knowledge that I have picked up on flying a helicopter is just doing things like this and learning what is the helicopter trying to do when I change the variables, when I add more power, when I add cyclic, when I add anti-torque. What is it the helicopter wants to do based on the input that I have given it? And then you'll find yourself, starting to showboat and doing things like sideways flying. And I got to be careful because I think there's Apaches near us. And you'll get to really have fun with helicopters. Alright, so now let's talk about some of the easier ways to fly a helicopter. So once again, we're going to pick up. And now I'm going to try taxiing. Believe it or not, a lot of situations, especially in the military, the helicopters very often do taxi. And so this is the next thing that I recommend you practice. Practice walking it, essentially, is what I like to call it. Just walking the helicopter. Maintain your speed. Using that anti-torque to bring it to where you want. And just practice your taxi. And what you'll find is if you're not careful, in ground effect like this, the aircraft will actually begin to accelerate at very low power settings. Very low power settings. It really doesn't require a lot, as you guys are seeing right there. So we're going to reduce our collective. I'm going to pull it back a little bit, and let's slow it back down. Now, I don't want, notice I'm still not pulling hard. We also don't want a tail strike. Just take your time. Once you get it nice and comfy, just sort of watch your airspeed. The airspeed indicator is not going to do much at this point. But we'll just walk it on over to the runway. You taxi just like anything else. Oh, that was my fault. I need to increase the tension on my collective, and I let go of it so that way I could show you guys the flyby view, and it sank to the floor. So, yeah, that'll happen if you let go of your collective and it falls. I just don't have the tension high enough yet. I've been playing around with it, deciding where I want it. Let's pull that collective back again. Now first I'm going to show you guys essentially a rolling takeoff for a helicopter. And then we'll do, of course, what everyone likes, which is the vertical takeoff. But again, everything is real gentle. Watch that controls indicator. Not doing much. Now I'm still pitching to the right because I don't want it to slide. Okay, we don't want to slide forward. You still have to work with inertia. And this is part of why I really like DCS for this kind of stuff, is because it really does a good job of demonstrating a little bit of everything. And I recommend DCS if you guys really want to practice things like this. You don't have to do combat. Air-to-air refueling, the carrier traps, flying helicopters around, things like that. It's really a lot of fun in this. Alright, so here, I'm going to go ahead and set us down. And normally you wouldn't land here, but let's go ahead and get to the next segment here. Alright, so now it's time to fly this puppy. So, let me get my view centered right. There we go. Adjust my headset a little bit. You guys have to forgive me, I'm still battling a little bit of a cold. So now we're going to do exactly what we've already practiced. I'm going to pick it up a little bit. Just like we did before. Just like that. But now watch what I'm going to do. Watch the collective. I'm not going to really add much power. I'm going to pitch a little bit forward. Just barely. And watch as the aircraft starts to accelerate. Pay attention to the collective power. I haven't really changed it. We're starting to lift. As the forward momentum increases, my understanding is the downforce from the rotors increase. And now we've got a good forward momentum with almost no power change whatsoever in the collective. Now the other thing I recommend you guys look into is what is called the pilot trimmer, or the cyclic trimmer. It gets really tiring on your wrists, especially with like a big HOTAS or something like the Thrustmaster Warthog or even this Virpil. Holding it forward like this, you guys can see how far I've got the cyclic forward. So with a pilot trimmer, what you do is you would put the stick where you want it, hold your trimmer button, and then you can rest your hand. It will essentially hold the stick, or the cyclic, in its current position. Now notice, even though we're moving around, notice the cyclic now. Or not the cyclic, the anti-torque pedals. They're almost centered. Once it gets moving forward, you can more or less start flying it like a normal plane. Okay, and even when it comes to turning, we just bank. But now we're getting really low as we start losing some of that lift. So if we want to climb at this point, this is where we have to add more collective. So bring the collective up. And our airspeed's not going to change very much. Notice I'm pushing forward a little bit more on the cyclic now. Because now I've reached an altitude that I want. Once you get the altitude you want, you can increase, either leave the cyclic where it was to sort of maintain the current airspeed. If you want to go faster, you add more cyclic. We can retrim it. And off we go. Now we got a little bit of slip. You guys can see that going over there. Alright, so now let's do the takeoff that everybody loves, right? The vertical takeoff. Reset my camera here. And then we'll talk about landing. And let's do this just because I like it. Uh-oh. Alt P? There we go. Let's bring my camera forward a little bit. There we go. There's what I'd look like in a military suit. There we go, a flight suit. Okay, so now, to do a vertical takeoff, it's the same principles as everything we've already learned. Okay, it's maintaining aircraft positioning all the way through the takeoff until you reach a good altitude to start adding forward pitch. But you're going to need a lot more collective now. So adding that collective back in. There's the rotation, counteracting the rotation. Watching the pitch, watching the roll, adding collective. Trying to watch that forward momentum. We don't want it yet. Just continuing to look forward. I'm trying to maintain a good visual perspective of where I want. Coming up, coming up, coming up. Now the thing about vertical takeoffs is they require a lot of power. Notice how high the collective is now. Okay, and so you have to watch your engine temps too, because they'll tend to rise. And then when you're ready, gentle pitch forward. Trim it. Watching that descent rate. I don't really want to descend. And off you go. Adjust your collective for position, altitude, or descent, excuse me. Now, to start having fun with the helicopter, this is where I like, I'm not going to change my collective positioning at all. I'm just going to fly it like an airplane now. I want to go down, I'm pitching the cyclic forward. When I get to where I want, I'm retrimming, keeping it low, and just flying it like a plane, having fun. Even using left anti-torque to sort of steer the nose a little bit. You don't want to use a lot of anti-torque when you're flying it now. Just a little bit, just to sort of help steer the nose around, but you don't want a lot. Overstressing it and you can find yourself in a bad spot. I've broken tail rotors before in this. I've done all kinds of goofy stuff. But, again, adding more collective as we get close to these trees. Pitching nose up, letting her climb. Back down. But once you get moving forward, it's pretty easy to understand what to do. And it can be a lot of fun. Just remembering that the big thing that's controlling your vertical and forward momentum is going to still be the collective. Keep an eye on that controls indicator as I'm flying, guys. No change to the collective this time, just flying it around. These helicopters, I'll tell you right now, are a ton of fun to fly down low. Grip it, rip it, scare the birds out of the trees. Once you get to that point, I promise they are a blast. The other thing that I'll tell you is with helicopters especially, I mean, I'm a big advocate for virtual reality anyway, but helicopters, huge difference in VR. That depth perception becomes even more critical in a rotor head than a fixed wing, in my opinion. For simulation purposes. Let's see here. Where was our airbase? Oh, there it is. I knew it was around here. So now let's figure out how to land. So to land a helicopter, first thing you have to do is put yourself in a position to control it, right? This is where we talked about that trim button, right? This is where even Microsoft Flight Simulator has this as well, is a trimmer reset. The thing to be ready about the reset is you're going to get a very violent adjustment if you don't slowly retrim the helicopter. So notice if I just pull the nose up to slow it down, I start climbing, right? Because we still have all that forward momentum. So what you want to do, let's get moving fast again. Let's talk about how to slow it down without changing altitude too much. Now remember, I'm not a professional, and it's been a while since I've been in DCS, or any helicopter really for that matter, so understand the explanation, not necessarily the perfection of the demonstration. Okay, so let's head back towards the runway. And look at that bank. You guys can really bank the crap out of a helicopter, and it's that much more fun. I love messing around in the DCS Huey. It's too much fun. Alright, so let's get some altitude too. If we want to slow the helicopter down, but I don't necessarily want to change altitude too much, the first thing I'm going to do is actually reduce collective and start pitching aft. That will change. See, notice that we even started to climb. Now I'm just putting collective off. As I drop the collective, I'm pulling back further on the cyclic. Lowering collective, pulling back further. Lowering the collective, pulling back further. Now here's one of the things you have to watch for. This is where helicopters get scary. It's something called VRS, vertical ring state, or vortex ring state, excuse me. And what will happen is as you start losing forward momentum, it requires more lift on the main rotors to maintain the aircraft's flight. And if you let it drop too fast, what will happen is the aircraft essentially descends faster than the lift that can be generated by the main rotor. At low altitudes like we are now, if you get into VRS, it is very likely you're going to end up a smoking hole in the ground. Okay, so I'm going to climb up a little bit and show you guys an example of that, and hopefully be able to come out of it. And I'll show you some tips on hopefully how to get yourself out of it if you get into it. So just keep climbing here for a second. Because this is probably the hardest point, is on the descent or when you are wanting to arrest your forward momentum. This is where helicopters get really tricky and scary. Now notice I'm back on my anti-torque pedals too. You're having to use more anti-torque to maintain the aircraft position. Alright, so hopefully I'm high enough. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to really sink the collective down and watch how quickly she starts to fall. We've got enough forward speed that it's not happening yet. Watch our airspeed indicator. As we start losing that speed, I'll tell you guys when we're in it. There it is, we're in it. So now I'm going to pull the collective up real fast. Okay? That's one of those few moments you really want to get the collective up. Okay? But if you don't, I'll show you guys. I'll go ahead and make myself a smoking hole in the ground. So there it is. We are definitely in it. If I try to fix it, that was at max collective. I pulled my collective up as far as I could, and we still crashed. And the reason for that was the aircraft was falling faster than the lift that could be generated by the main rotor. Like I said, at very low altitudes, what just happened will happen. Hello. So, let me show you another way to hopefully get out of that. There's our burning embers over there. So if we end up in it again, what you can sometimes do is pitch it forward, add your collective, and usually the forward momentum will help pull you out. But again, you don't ever want to be in that state at low altitude regardless. But the forward momentum is what will definitely help you come out of it if you can get into forward momentum. Don't just try to rely on the collective, try to pitch it forward, try to get the aircraft moving forward again. Again, usually 9 times out of 10 you'll only enter VRS if you are at very, very low speed. Okay, you have very limited, usually under 30, 40 knots. Anything above that, and usually auto rotation will keep the aircraft flying for a minute. Alright, so now let's talk about how to actually land it, like we were started on here. So what I'm going to do now is let's aim for that parking spot there next to the, what is that, C-130 looks like? I can't actually see it. Nope, looks like a C-17. So you can see our forward airspeed is still pretty high, so I'm going to be reducing my collective, pulling aft, then watching my vertical speed, adding collective to maintain vertical speed. Okay, using my anti-torque pedals. Now this is where things start to get wonky. We're just going to slowly remove collective. Notice that we're dropping almost 600 feet per minute. That's too fast. So I'm going to keep feathering that collective. And again, better in practice than in demonstration, right? And this is just if you want to land at a spot that is very close. But notice still small movements. As we get lower, it won't fight you quite as much on the collective. But constantly adjusting the collective to maintain that descent rate. In most aircraft, most helicopters, you can feel it when it's going to happen. Start noticing a lot of shaking and things like that, usually that's a bad spot. And you can also hear it in the rotors. You start hearing the air get real smooth, the choppiness goes away, and chances are you're about to approach a bad spot. And all I'm showing you guys here is the vertical descent. Maintaining my position, more or less. I got a little too far aft. So now we're going to look forward. Sort of looking at the top right corner of our box there. Just trying to keep it relatively in the same spot. I'm doing a terrible job at it at the moment, but I'm trying. Watching our descent rate. Usually anything about 500 feet per minute or below, and you're normally pretty good. You start getting to the 600, 700, 800, and that's when you start looking at possible VRS. So my thing is, especially with low forward momentum, I like to keep it about 500 as my golden rule. Sort of like we do in fixed wing. And then once we get down low again, it's just like we practiced when we were taking off. Now you've got your visual references back. And then just let it slowly sit. Now you can see we're in that pillow. Here we are in the ground effect. So we just got to reduce that collective even further to let the aircraft sit through it. Okay? Now, I'm going to show you guys a forward descent, and then we'll call it. And you'll probably just be like me and get to a point where it's actually easier. I find it to be a little easier to control when I start moving more quickly with it. So if we're doing a longer descent, say an approach, that's when, again, same principles. So if we were looking towards the end of the runway, right? Which is more accurate. It's a matter of managing our descent rate, managing our forward speed, still looking for that 500 feet per minute or so, reducing collective, reducing collective. Now in forward momentum, when you have it, you can very easily do a bit faster than 500 feet per minute. Because you've got the forward momentum to keep you out of the VRS. But you still don't want to come down like a piano. Alright, so still monitoring it. But again, real gentle. Notice the cyclic. Almost no movement here. We're just real gentle, feathering our way down with the collective. Watching our airspeed. Alright. So a good 60 knot approach here in the Huey, doing pretty good. But now, at my current angle, I'm going to overshoot. So I'm actually going to slow the Huey down, which means I'm going to reduce the collective further because I'm pulling aft. Losing that airspeed, bleeding that off. Watching that descent rate. That's a little bit better. Adding that collective back in once I get to where I want to be. Anti-torque comes back in as we start slowing down. Watching those shakes, bringing the collective back in, feathering it. Looking for that ground effect, and there we are. We are in it. You know when you're in ground effect because the aircraft will smooth way out. Now we'll just do like we did before and taxi it back over to parking. And you'll learn to let the aircraft do what it wants to your benefit. You'll learn to let it slide when you want it to turn a certain way, or when you want to position it a certain way. Everything about a helicopter is give and take. If I give it right anti-torque to turn it, I need to take it away again to stop it. If I give it right bank to stop it from sliding, I need to take it away again with a little bit of left to counteract the movement. So everything is give it and take it. Give it and take it. There we go. Nice little taxi back in. Getting a little low, so I'm adding a little bit of collective, not much. And even down here low, if you really want to, you can use your trimmer to sort of set the overall position. And then it becomes, again, back on the fingertips, right? Oh, got a little wonky there. Now notice as it gets wonky, I don't try to fight it real hard. I just, okay, it's getting wonky, it's rocking a little bit. I'm seeing what it's doing, or it's going to the left. So now I'm just adding a little bit to the right and forward. Getting it back to where I want to be. Looking up forward the whole time. That's why you guys probably aren't seeing the gauges in this shot. You might be, I'm not sure. If it starts to walk, bring it back. Oop, see, there we go. I released that trimmer switch. So now I gotta fix it. But I'm just, there we go. Back to where I want to be. And walking it back over. Okay. So, let's just go park it. I don't like continuing the taxi. I like to do things ridiculously unprofessionally. When you start getting comfortable with it, start doing stuff like this, because trust me, it gets really fun. Oh, screwed it up. That was ground effect. I had too much collective when I got into ground effect. Back it up. Nobody likes to show off, right? I do. Ah! Stop walking forward. And even here, I'm not rushing it. Like, you know, if it does something I don't want it to do, come back, try again. I'm telling you, looking out forward really helps. You can see how things smoothed out quite a bit when I stopped looking to the side. It's been a while. But anyways, guys, I hope you guys found that helpful. I hope it gives you a better explanation of how a helicopter works and gave you some good ideas and some things to practice on to help you start getting familiar with helicopters and getting comfortable with them. Like I said, start with that takeoff, start with the lift, start slow. Don't try to just pick it up and go flying. Don't be in a rush. Learn what your particular helicopter that you're flying wants to do. You know, the Apaches over there are going to do something completely different that the UH-1's going to do. You know, you have a bunch of different things that that is going to affect the way that you fly the helicopter. So learn your bird first and take it slow. Don't be in a rush to fly it. Be in a rush to learn it. All right? As always, guys, stay safe and healthy, and I will see you in the next one.